This is a 58 or 59 Tweed Vibrolux. It's been in before. Previous tech did a good job with the bulk work of the recap back in 04-ish, judging by the dates on these caps. I had done the bias tweak here. That's not my work, but it's very good work. The old selenium rectifier is still in the amp, but it's not connected to anything. And then the amp came in later, and I did these and some work in here where the old yellow Astrons had given up the ghost. Added some screen grids and some grid stoppers. Previous tech had done these 1 ohm bias measurement resistors. That's all fine. It's got some Tungsol 6v6s, older, much older, but not original rectifier tube, and some 60s tubes. This is an RCA, and this is a Tungsol. And the amp is overall sounding pretty good, but the owner was complaining of hum. He said that he had been playing the amp more lately than usual and noticed more hum than he remembered. And in testing the amp, I found 3 things. Number 1, the background hum, which is normal for this model because on this amp and other models at the lower end of Fender's price range at that time, they did not use a bipolar heater supply. One side, here you have pin 1, and on the preamp tubes, pin 9, just goes directly to chassis. The other side has a heater connection. So instead of having 3.15 volts, 3.15 volts on one side and 3.15 volts on the other, with a reference in the center to chassis, which is normally how it's done. It just has one side of the heater supply going to chassis, the other one has the full 6.3 volts, and that's how you end up here. And that gives you a heater supply that works, but it's prone to a little bit of background hum, and that's what I hear. I'll show you why he was experiencing more hum than you hear at this point. But to understand that, this amp has 3 different input jacks, and they have various levels of gain, from lowest gain to medium to highest gain. And when it's working correctly, there's a voltage divider here, there's a lesser voltage divider here, and there's no voltage divider here. So the way this is designed is you plug into this jack, you have a 68K resistor, and then these 2 are in parallel to ground, so 68K, 34K. So that's a pretty steep voltage divider, 68K, 34K, and your input impedance there is about 100K-ish. If you plug into this one, you go this one and this one in parallel, so these become parallel, so you have 34K and 68K, and then their input impedance is that still 100K, but you have a voltage divider more stacked in your favor, so 34K top, 68K bottom. If you plug into this one, you have all 3 of these in parallel. 68K in parallel with 68K gives you 34K, 34K in parallel with 68K puts you somewhere around 22 to 24K. I don't need to do the math on that. It's somewhere around there. So let's say 23K. So you plug into this one, you have 23K between the input and the tube. There's no voltage divider at all, and the input resistance is just that of the tube itself. It's not set by resistors here. That also means that any biasing of the tube is done through the path from the grid to ground, which in this case is directly through your guitar pickup. Later Fenders would have a 1 meg here, which would be in parallel with your guitar's volume pot and pickup, so that you have constant reference to ground through the 1 meg. That's put in parallel with your volume pot and your pickups, and that takes a lot of DC off the guitar. It's just a nice way. It's totally safe either way, but the 1 meg, in addition to depopping this when you plug and unplug cables, just helps keep DC off your volume pot. So I would want to add a 1 meg here. It would not change the sound of the amp in any way. It would just give you the benefit of a little bit less wear and tear on your volume pots. But in this case, this jack here is not making contact with its shunt. So it's not working completely as designed. I hope this is clear. If you go into this one, you still get 68K and then 34K. So this one's working as designed if you plug into it. If you plug into this one, it's not normaling to this, so you have 68K, 68K. So you have a higher input impedance, about 138, 140K, whatever, 136K. But you have a 68K, 68K divider rather than a 34K, 68K divider. So you have less gain in this one than as designed. And if you plug into this one, these two are in parallel. This one is not because of that shunt connection there, which means you, instead of having, say, 24K between the input and the grid, you only have 34K. That's pretty negligible. You're not going to really hear that difference. But as the amp came into me, the owner was using this Boss patch cable like this. And electronically, this doesn't do much. You're not going to hear a huge difference. What happens if this is working correctly is the signal goes through the 68K resistor. It's not in parallel with these two anymore. This one, the signal goes from here to here, through this loop to here to here. It just makes a little loop with 68Ks in series. It does nothing. It's not connected to anything in theory. So what you would have is just the input signal going to this grid with only 68K grid stopper versus the 34 it would have without this cable, or the 23 it would have without this cable if this jack were working correctly. But in this case, let me turn the volume up a little bit and plug in a cable. If I touch, I turn it up, maybe you can hear it even better. If I touch these plugs, you get that hum. And that's an exaggeration because I'm touching them. But that hum is added just from the presence of that jack. That plug. This little Boss pedal plug adds hum at all times, is most apparent if I touch them. If you touch a cable like this, you shouldn't hear anything because it's supposed to be grounded. These are plastic molded, they're garbage. This is a bad cable, it needs to go away. It does not even need to be there because the amp does not get any gain benefit from having even a good cable plugged into these two. If you're using this one, you're just going to say 68K for your grid stopper instead of 24K. Most people are not going to hear that difference. If you do, it'll be slightly less high end, ever the tiniest bit. Hard to hear, hard to pick out in a blind test, given how little else there is in the circuit. I don't recommend it. So I need to talk to the owner, let him know that this is not to be used, and given that noise level, it should not be used for pedals or anything. This is a bad cable. If he wants, I can replace this one input jack where the metal fatigue has set in, and that's not making contact there. If he wants them all to match, I can give him 3 new ones. Or I can leave this as is. He can just not plug any cable into here. That'll still give him voltage divider, middle, no voltage divider, though the middle will have a little less gain than in stock form. And then as far as the remaining hum in the amp, that's all due to the heater wiring. I would be glad to rewire this to have a bipolar supply with a centered balance point, like a later Fender, what we associate with a higher quality amp. And that's just something Fender did on what they considered to be their student and intermediary models. But other than that, the amp is sounding quite nice. Now, I use this amp to play through during my live stream Saturday. So it was on about 2.5 hours. And at one point, there was a noise that I think was, it went away when I turned the vibrato back on and then back off. I think it might be related to the wiring of the, in here. This is, looks to be fine, but it's a mic cable going to an adapter. And there's that thud. So it's a 1/4 inch attached to that RCA. And it may just be some corrosion. But maybe seems to be a bad cable. Again, this is a 1/4 inch plastic molded Roland thing for a keyboard. Probably. This is probably like an expression pedal connection, which was never really designed to have audio on it. Not that the trim shunt is really audio, but I suspect that thud that I heard during the live thing that I'm getting a little bit now is just this cable. So I will talk to him and see if he would like me to make a new cable from this foot switch to an RCA, or get him a new RCA connector foot switch, because that is not nice if that thud comes back. When that thud comes back, it will come back. And, you know, I let's add a little RC booster and some halo delay to it, and you get forgive my early morning clumsy playing. It's about 8:30 in the morning, and I'm still on my first cup of coffee. But I want to get this thing up so the owner could see it, so that he can have an informed starting place for our conversation. This amp is overall healthy. 2 Roland Boss plastic cables seem to be the main cause of the issue, and I would, if he's only using the one input and he wants to keep it original, he doesn't have to have me change the jacks. That's a nicety. If he wants to have this thing fully functional as designed, most guys who play these only ever use this input anyway, so it can stay like this. Just know that this input's not going to give the quite as much gain as designed. And the heater hum would make this amp much, much quieter, but it's not a very loud, noticeable hum in the absence of that bad plug that was in as it came into me.